Howdy, lieutenants and economists.
The most volatile, evil, disgusting things on the planet, humans. If you have a video request, you can always go to assholeconsulting.com.
Yeah, I am gonna charge you, kids. And that is the importance of not fucking up.
You are such an asshole!
Well, a pretty good video request here, and if you have a video request, you can always go to assholeconsulting.com. We'll take care of you for a price for a fee. Rod writes, "Hi Aaron, you did such a great job on my last video request, preventing liberals from changing topics, that I thought I should have you do another educational video on the debt crisis in the U.S. I find that too many people are blowing off our nearly $19 trillion debt as if it were no big deal. Truthfully, I'm not joking. The reason they do is they don't understand what a trillion is. They really don't. They just don't have the perspective. So that's ignorance is why they just, the electricity's still on. Kim Kardashian still a slut. As if it were no big deal and will have no effect on their lives. To those of us who do understand the ramifications, this is a huge crisis. I was shocked this summer when I spoke to a rather wealthy business owner who said, have you seen his financial statement? I love when they say he's a rather wealthy. He's a business owner, he's wealthy. Did you see the financial statements? Till I see audited balance sheets, I don't believe a second they're wealthy. I don't. He said he was not concerned because he talked to his financial manager and was told not to worry about the debt or the Fed printing money in their quantitative easing stimuluses or stimuli. The financial manager said the Fed will just keep printing money and basically all will be okay because of... Yes, because printing off money has always resulted in charm and puppies and unicorns and people shitting out gold bricks. That is the natural consequence of printing off money. I don't know how... See, what's funny is this financial manager probably gets paid a lot more than me because he's a good, reliable employee. I thought, are you kidding me? Anyway, I'm sure you are well versed on this topic. You can educate those who have no clue on why the debt is a big deal to our future. You may have to bring it down to a personal level for some, such as comparing it to a person signing up for more than one credit cards to cover their expenses as opposed to just cutting down on their spending. I've tried this approach with some, but I'm usually told it's different with the government and doesn't apply to them, blah, blah, blah. What say you? Thanks, Rod. Okay, Rod, so I put together, I apologize, normally I'm a little bit more free-flowing, but this is going to be more lecture-y and boring economics-y than that. So let us explain and get a grasp of how big the debt is. We could talk millions, billions, trillions, but it doesn't really matter because to an individual, $10 billion is a lot. And you'd never be able to pay that off as an average individual. But the United States government rules over a population of 310 million people, 20, half of which sort of work, and we produce a lot of shit. Right? And so what we got to do is look at it as a whole, looking at the national debt as a whole relative to the economic production as the country as a whole. Okay, so it would be like on a private individual level, you would say this person makes $30,000 a year and they have debts of $30,000. Say they have a mortgage. You say, well, that's not too bad. Mortgage only $30,000 makes $30,000. He doesn't make a lot, but he doesn't have a lot of debt. So that's how you kind of do it. And what we got to do is instead of comparing it to an income or salary, what we do is we compare the amount of debt the government, the nation has, to our economic production, our GDP. And that's where the concept of debt to GDP comes in. And that's all we're doing. It's like on a national level, as if the government was one single person, we take how much it generates, GDP, and compare it to how much it has in debt. Now, as it stands right now, I think we're at about 110, 112%. And it depends on what economic theory you want to subscribe to, which economists you listen to, but you start to get worried around 75% of GDP. Some say 100, some say 200. It all depends. The larger point, though, is that you shouldn't have any debt because that is proof, not an indication, not a suggestion. It is proof that your system is not feasible. You are spending more than you take in, and thus you have annually deficits, which add up into the accumulation of your total debt. So you are by default, by nature, by definition, parasitic. Right? I know a lot of people don't like it, but that's what it is. If you have a debt, that means you have not produced enough as much as you consume. So that's basically what it is. Now, our debt to GDP is, again, about 110%. And governments and individuals are not the same, which is correct. But to put things in perspective, the only time we've ever had this level of debt was at World War II. We were in a global war. We haven't been in a global war. We've had like police action, if you could call it that, but largely in part due to George Bush's profligate spending, and then more recently President Obama's twice as profligate spending on, and that, you know, ideally you take debt to invest in productive assets or invest in businesses that generate more than what you borrowed, so you can pay back the original principal, interest, and have money for yourself. That's the whole concept of debt. We just pissed it away on parasites. That money was largely spent either bombing people, and you don't make a lot of money bombing people. Bombs don't pay dividends. And spending money on trailer trash, single moms, welfare recipients, people who are about to die soon, welfare or Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I know that may not be nice, but it's true from a financial and literal real-world perspective, which fewer and fewer people live in. We just pissed away the money. It was basically a big vote bribing operation, so now Obama and the Democrats got elected because they spent the most money. And, well, don't worry, the deficits don't matter. So that is why our debts are so big and what they are today. So we haven't been at war, but we have war-like levels of debt. Now, why does debt matter? All right. Right now, everyone's dismissing. So, well, the light's still on, and nothing bad has happened, and gas is cheap, and everything. I got a job, and I got mine. Okay, that's true. But debt can play. This is not things that happen immediately, especially with governments, especially with the largest government in the world. So this can take a generation or two, or even three, before the chickens come home to roost, as they say. So let's express mathematically, reality, why having a certain too much debt is a bad thing. The key thing is that you accrue so much debt that there is no way you could pay it back. Usually there is an interest component associated with the debt because people just don't lend you money for free. They want to get a rate of return. And so it either gets to the point that interest rates are, you can't even afford the interest anymore, or you don't have enough economic production ever to pay back the interest and the principal. Right? Now, when that happens, be it an individual or a country, people won't lend you any more money. Look at Argentina. Look at Russia. Look at all the... they just couldn't pay it back. Interest rates changed on them. Their interest expense went way up. There's also a thing with the terms of what the debt is denominated in, either dollars or pesos. So the peso goes down, the dollar becomes more valuable. Oh my gosh, it's 3 times the amount. So that stuff can certainly happen. But aside from that, the general principle is if debts get too big, you're unable to pay them back. No one's going to lend you any more money. Right? Now, you don't pay them back. People lost all these trillions of dollars investing in you. They're likely not to invest in you anymore in the future. So now they're going to stop lending to you. They're going to say, you're a bad credit risk. Fuck you, I'm not going to invest in you. I'm not lending to your country. I'm not lending to your government. Fuck you. And so what ends up happening then is your economy tanks because no one wants to invest. Forget lending money so that Barack Obama can bribe all the single mothers in the world to vote for him. Right? Like, why would I invest? You guys defaulted. You're not even going to let us get our money. No, wait. No, we're not investing in you anymore. So then your economy tanks as well. Now, another thing is that people who have been dependent upon government spending, deficit spending, are so all of a sudden abruptly cut off. And this is no different than cutting off a heroin addict or an alcoholic or something like that. Where there's money, people will grow. That's how it happens. Whether it's debt or equity financing, it doesn't matter. Where there's money, people will grow. And so pretty much you have the lower classes just spitting out children left and right. You have aliens coming in here, illegal or not, immigrants coming in here, spitting out kids they can't afford. They go on the government dole. So people start investing. Now it also happens, doesn't just happen with illegal immigrants and Democrats and other type of parasitic individuals. The dot-com bubble, the housing bubble. When all this deficit spending, all this debt is created, you have bubbles that form. People start investing around this money, and that builds up all these various economic or sociological or demographic bubbles. And when no one lends the government money anymore, and you got to cut it off, what do you think all those people who rely on a government check and never even occurred to them to get a job because they think it because Whitey owes them, or they're discriminated against, or they're just trailer trash and too fucking lazy? Wyoming. So then you get riots. Then not only that, you get like you have over in Venezuela, you get like there's no food in the shelves, and people start to really suffer. And in the case of communist Russia, starve and die. That's maybe a really important consequence of too much debt. I don't know. Anyway, so these bubbles burst, and this is a very common criticism, if not one of the most common criticisms coming from the Austrian School of Economics, is that debt, government or private sector, doesn't matter, if there are no checks on the credit worthiness, like you are just lending out money and printing off money and lending it out, bubbles will form and it is no longer efficient. These bubbles are not sustainable in the long run and they will burst. And if you're lucky, it's just the dot-com bubble bursting. If you're not as lucky, it's the housing market crashing in the Great Recession. If you're really not lucky, then it's starvation and you're in China in 1950s and 60s. Yay. I'm sorry, that would require you to know history. I know, I'm trying to keep it down to the normal people. All right, so then the question is, well, okay, we don't have to borrow money. And this is a common argument, governments are different than people. They could just print off more money. And you're right, they can, and they have. And this is very common throughout the world and throughout history. You can see they did it in Rome, the Weimar Republic, Yugoslavia. And if you look at those places where they have printed off more money, what happens? Well, you pay off the debt, but in flooding the economy with all these brand new dollar bills or Reichmarks or whatever you want to call them, you cause hyperinflation because the amount of goods and services have not increased with the, Zimbabwe. There's a perfect modern day example. Everyone's a zillionaire in Zimbabwe. That doesn't mean they're rich because all they did was print off way more money to pay off the debts. There wasn't any actual increase in the amount of goods and services they could buy. So what this does is, basically it's just a big tax, and it taxes everyone, but disproportionately affects the poor because as the money starts to seep into the economy, it drives the prices of everything up, and the rich people can kind of hedge themselves against this because they have a lot of money, or they have assets that produce shit, like they have businesses that will produce valuable, like a car will naturally go up with inflation. Agriculture will go up, rents will go up with inflation. But if you're poor and you don't own any assets, or you don't have any silver or gold to hedge against this, it's a huge tax. And typically the argument comes from the left. You just print off more money. And again, your ignorance shows like you're zippered down and your dick's hanging out and you're giving a speech in the 4th grade, okay? You don't realize it and you look like a fucking fool because you are advocating things that really hurt the people you presume to champion and care most about, the poor. And you hurt them the most. And those are the ones that typically die off first, not, in these mass starvations and socialist utopias. So prices go up, everybody's standards of living goes down, and all you really did was take all the purchasing power from the people and you gave it to the government. Now, people will still say, and they are 100% right, well, that hasn't happened here in the United States. We have the Federal Reserve printing off all this money. Why have we not seen inflation? Well, one, you have seen inflation, but let's explain first what the Federal Reserve is doing. Right now, I'm simplifying this, nobody wants to lend the federal government money. It has a ton of it. No smart or savvy investor wants to lend the government any money. So the federal government's having trouble finding enough lenders to lend it money. On top of it, Obama and the Democrats, and even the Republicans too, have been basically bribing the people to vote for them, and they just can't find enough money. So since they can't find any lenders, what do? They're going to have the federal government print off money. Now, they euphemistically call it quantitative easing. All it is printing off money. That's all it is. And they're doing two things with it. One, they're still to this day buying all the shitty-ass mortgages and loans and crap, and soon-to-be student loans, I predict, from the banking and financial industry. If you don't believe, I'm not making this up, this isn't conspiracy. Go look at the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. Oh, you can't read a balance sheet? Well, maybe you should just shut the fuck up and stop talking about crap you don't understand. In the meantime, look at the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve and look at where it spent all of its money it's printed off. It's basically lent the government money by buying bonds. That's how you lend the government money. The government gives you a government bond and you give them money and they promise to pay you back. And they've also been buying all these crappy loans off of the bank's balance sheets. Now, this does two things. One, it finances the government's debts without actually having to go to genuine lenders. Two, it causes bubbles. Because people say, well, there is no inflation. Well, yeah, maybe not in gas or milk or whatever else have you. But when the government buys all these mortgage-backed securities and lowers its interest rates, now all this money is in the banking system. Well, what do banks do? Well, banks make money by lending it. And the interest rate that the Federal Reserve charges banks is fucking nothing, so they can lend it out to any dipshit moron that can make 1 or 2% off a rate of return. So a lot of this money ends up in two areas, and you might have noticed prices going up, and that is housing and stocks, the stock market. Okay? Now, when housing and stocks go up, we're all happy and excited because everyone's a fucking moron in this country. What you really want, you should not be happy when housing and stocks go up, because if you're younger especially, you want to buy housing and stocks, and you want it to be cheap as possible. You want to pay $1 for a share of IBM, and then when you retire, you want to jack up to $1,000 a share. Right? I don't know why people think expensive housing is a good idea, because that just means higher rents you got to pay and higher property taxes and higher mortgage payment you got to pay out. And stocks, I don't know why you guys are so excited about stocks going up, especially if you haven't acquired any. That just means it's more expensive for you. Oh, the baby boomers are having a blast with this. All these guys with their 401ks and they're having a blast with it. But that still doesn't change the fact that this is inflation. All right? The other reason you don't see this kind of trickle into the rest of the economy in our normal day consumption of purchaser goods like milk, gas, etc., a lot of people are just not spend happy. If you look at the velocity of money, I'm going to really simplify it, it's the rate at which $1 is constantly respent. So I'm feeling perky today, and I'm going to go buy a bottle of booze. I go to the booze dealer, and you're the booze dealer. You get your dollar, like, hey, I'm feeling perky today. The economy's booming, everything's shaking. I'm going to go on a trip, and you give your money to the gas station and say, yeah, I'm feeling happy today. So the velocity of money also then causes inflation. But no one's feeling perky or happy today. Matter of fact, people are still stinging and reeling from that Great Recession. And oh yeah, the real rich people who spend a lot of money, because you morons put in this veritable socialist that hates rich people and is a racist and all this other shit, just doesn't like production, and we're going to change things and fuck hard work, and we're going to get rid of participation trophies, and let's bring on screw the corporations. Yeah, a lot of people are investing or spending a lot of money. Okay? I know, you all drove somewhere for Thanksgiving, I know. But where the real money is, I'm not talking us poor people who like, oh, I spent $20 on gas, I wouldn't have spent, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like the real movers and shakers, the ones like, I'm going to buy a $2 billion plant. Not in the U.S., I ain't. I'm going to South Korea. Do-diggy-dang-diggly. So, that is another reason why you're not seeing inflation in our modern day purchases. But we do see inflation in housing and stocks, because that's corporations are also borrowing money very cheaply at low interest rates and then repurchasing their shares so they can drive stock prices up, and then the corporate executives can cash in on their stock options. So that's where the money is. Now, finally, you would say, okay, somebody's got to catch on to this. We cannot just print off all the money in the world. Right? Yes, velocity could be very low. Yes, we can keep sinking into the stock market and the housing market, but inevitably that money's got to seep out. Well, there's one other huge, massive sponge sucking out the U.S. dollars, keeping it out of the U.S. domestic currency, or economy, and that is the fact that we are the world's reserve currency. You say, well, what the hell is that? Basically, after World War II, the world was shit, and the only country that had any productive capacity was the United States. And so what ended up happening, this makes a little bit of sense, is especially in international trade, well, let's say you have Venezuelan pesos or Bolivians, whatever the hell it is, and you have Korean won. Well, how do you transact, pesos versus won? Well, the Venezuelans don't trust the won, the South Koreans don't trust the peso. Hey, you know what, though? We both agree that dollars have value. And you see this happening in the real world. If any of you have traveled to the Caribbean, even Canada, some other countries near the United States, or just shitty second or third world countries, they will gladly take dollars because their currency has no value, but they know dollars do. So there's a benefit in having this trust, and we established this trust in World War II. We're the only game in town. We're the only economy that hasn't been bombed to shit. We're the only economy that can actually produce all the shit you need. And by gosh, guess what we accept here in the United States? We accept American dollars, and that's all. So what that did is it kind of made us a world reserve currency. Things were denominated in U.S. dollars. Contracts were written in U.S. dollars. We bought oil. All oil transactions until recently out of the Middle East were denominated in U.S. dollars. So people had to get U.S. dollars. And people wanted U.S. dollars because they used it as a store of value to hedge against their corrupt fucking banana republic, shitty ass, I know you girls are in love with it, Central American and South American countries that are still managed for shit, even though they're nowhere near approaching Western standards of living. I know you're all in love with foreign cultures, but it's still a shitty place to be, all right? The crappy Asian currency, Asian economies and the fall of Vietnam and all that other stuff. People wanted U.S. dollars, okay? So what that means is that we can print off money without it actually inflating our own economy because there's enough global demand for our currency that it never gets to our shores. It never really is spent here. Some of it's just used to hold and store value, kind of like gold or silver, right? Now, this basically gives the United States the biggest, cheapest, most cowardly cop-out. Because we have this reputation as being a stable country, we can get away by printing off all this money because the world's going to. But you would say, well, wait a minute. Even if we are the United States, we got a debt of 110% GDP. We keep printing off. Our money supply is quadrupled or quintupled, depending on which measurement of money supply you want to use. All these other things. Any sane, rational person would say, hey, fuck the United States. Let's go with a more stable currency, like, say, the Australian dollar or the Swiss franc or something like that. Well, there's a problem. One of two things. Let's say you're Switzerland, Norway perhaps. You have a positive balance. You don't have a net debt. You have a net assets. You run surpluses, not deficits. And even Switzerland was kicking around contemplating backing up their currency with gold. Well, the problem is Norway and Switzerland, great countries as they may be, are not big enough to produce enough of a world supply of currency without then some point in time down the road, the world saying, yeah, we don't like the Swiss currency anymore. We're just flooding it all back in, and we now demand all your Swiss crap, and we're going to flood your economy with your currency, causing hyperinflation in those countries. So you need a big enough country to absorb the world being using your currency as the world's reserve currency. And the United States, well, heck, back then we were 50% of the global production. Now we're only about 30, 35. So is that. The other thing is, you say, well, what about China? What about India? What about Russia? All these BRIC countries. And they were at one time going to put together a world reserve currency and a counter world reserve currency. Well, guess what? Bad as we are, we're still the best game in town. It's like going to a beauty pageant of fat chicks. We're the hottest fat chick. No one wants to fuck us, but we're still the hottest fat chick. We're still the only game in town. So if you got to fuck one of us, you got to fuck the United States. Because we have the nicest face. We have the greatest personality. Because China's got their own debt problems. They're going through a debt crisis that's even worse than ours, but that's more in the private sector, although it's government financed, but neither here nor there. They're highly corrupt. Russia's highly corrupt. Brazil just elected a communist. I don't know why people keep putting their fucking faith in Brazil. It's a fucking second-rate country filled with second-rate people that still believe in fucking Bolivia socialism. All right, well, fuck, even though they're Portuguese. Not to get too much in South American politics, but I don't know what you were thinking, like Brazil's going to come out of nowhere when they keep electing socialists. I don't know where you thought that was going to happen. Anyway, any potential contender to offer an alternative reserve currency does not exist. And that gives us the very glib and flippant position to keep printing off as much money as we want. You want to know why? Because everybody else has got to suck it up because we're still better than everyone else. We suck, we're bad, and there was a female economist, I forget her name, but it was a very clever observation she made. She says, we're the best-looking horse in the glue factory. We're all going to die, okay? Mathematically, running perpetual debts and deficits is not sustainable, okay? By definition, if you're running a deficit, that means you are not sustainable. You are parasitic. And soon people will cut us off. But as it stands right now, we're the only game in town. People still trust the United States. Look at the corruption index. This is a great thing. We're somewhat corrupt, but we're nowhere near as corrupt as any potential contender that would offer an alternative reserve currency. And so people, that's what currency is. It's trust. Do you think the dollar's going to have value? And even if you look at our welfare class, the dipshits we're letting in, the terrorist attacks, all the problems wrong with the United States, we still are pretty damn productive. We still are the largest economy, and we're still relatively uncorrupt. So when you put that all together, that means we have a printing press without inflation. And that's why you don't see inflation. And if it was any other country that was not a world reserve currency, they couldn't do it. It would cause inflation like it did in Zimbabwe, Yugoslavia, Weimar Republic, every other place. But because we are the world's reserve currency, and because there's so much demand, foreign demand for U.S. dollars, not to mention there's other functional demand for things being demanded in U.S. dollars, contracts and all that, we won't see the inflation. We can get away with it. We can avoid this one fate. I mean, and I've said this before, be lucky you're in the United States, because the world is paying for us right now. Do you really think your iPhone only costs $200? Do you really think that? Do you really think it only took $300, huh? If it was made in America, it'd be a $2,000 device because you actually have the real non-slave labor costs in there. We're getting subsidized. Chan and Wang over in China are slaving away for us because our fucking dollar is worth more than their yuan, their currency. What else? I mean, I'm just trying to think of all the different, India, those guys, Punjab, making the fucking shirts for us real dirt cheap. Yeah, the only reason these is because they're basically our slaves. That's how it is. And what's funny is the world is so fucking stupid. They'll get pissed off about us bombing some places over in the Middle East, but they won't get pissed off about us effectively enslaving the rest of the country or the rest of the world because of currency manipulation or because we have world reserve currency status. And we just keep printing off money. It's like the biggest fuck you ever to the world. But, average minds just don't see these machinations. They don't, hopefully I explained it to you clearly. You can kind of see it. But right now, people, like you just said, you got a fucking finance manager and this fucking wealthy business owner, and they can't figure this shit out. It just shows you what simple obfuscation, like having a central bank. Well, we'll just call it quantitative easing. And now, when they said that to me, I'm like, you're just printing off more money, you fucking dicks. You're fucking assholes. You're fucking tyrants. I see right through you. But everybody else, quantitative easing. That's got a lot of syllables. And that person has a doctorate from an Ivy League school. They must be really smart. I'll just sit here and go watching Kim Kardashian play video games. That's it. That's all there is. Now, my little video ain't going to make... It isn't, because people don't want... They're happy when the lights go on. They're happy when Kim Kardashian is a slut. They're happy when the fucking TV reality shows come on. And nothing is going to overcome that psychology. But if people were to start to wake up, and you start electing right people in the office, who dang diggly dangly. It'd be fun times ahead. And that's when you'd want some silver or some AR-15s. But anyway, hope that explained it. Hope it explained to you why debts are bad. We see it all the time. We see the costs and consequences of hyperinflation or defaulting on debts. You see in Argentina. Look at the history of South America and Central America. That's basically it. They're shitholes. Okay, there's the consequences of debt. But in this one instance, this very unique instance in economic history, where we have the world's reserve currency, we can basically violate that law. And that's why things are pretty great. It doesn't get any better than this. It doesn't. We got the world working for us for free. Because we got green fucking paper. That's it. Because fucking World War II generation kicked ass. That's the true legacy the World War II generation left us, is that piece of paper is still worth something today. Anyway, hope that explained everything. Toodles.